So if you've seen the news, Facebook is basically firing over 11,000 people, Amazon is firing over 10,000 people, and Twitter is also firing a bunch of people. But what nobody is talking about is that basically small businesses make up around 64% of all the new jobs in America. And guess what? If the economy is starting to slow down, that also means less people are going to be hired. So it's not just, for example, if you have a tech job, you're going to be affected. No, it's if you're also an average person getting hired by a small business. Like, you're gonna be affected either way. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what's causing this, how to make sure you're solid, and what to do to make sure that next time this happens, you're not caught basically like with your hands between your feet. I don't know what the saying is, but the point is you're not caught by surprise. Now, as always, guys, like this video and top out, also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing I want to say is this. It's very simple to understand what happened here. What happened is we had a pandemic. And to kind of help fight that, we close on the economy. And when you close the economy, that can cause a depression. To help fight that, we went ahead and printed a bunch of money and basically lowered interest rates to increase demand. And what happens with that is that can cause inflation. To help fight inflation, we went ahead now and we're basically doing economic easing. And what we're doing is we're raising interest rates to lower the demand to help fight inflation. Now, as you see here, the whole idea is that when it comes to finance and money and economics and all this stuff, it's kind of like you try to do one thing and that one thing leads to another thing and then another problem like surges out of nowhere. The point is this whole thing never ends, okay? So you have to be very careful. Now, I want to explain this in a very simple way. First of all, if you think about what's going on here with all these layoffs, you got to understand this, okay? There's this fallacy going on online, and let me show you guys this article real quick. I was reading this article, and this article was basically on Forbes. And it was, of course, with the guy himself, Elon Musk, and also Facebook and everything else that's going on. But overall, the main thing was this, okay? There's an entire article. If you go through Forbes, there are so many articles on layoffs. For example, how to treat your coworkers that are going to be laid off, how to make sense of it, how to prepare yourself for a layoff, because this is basically happening. It is a reality. But there was a very good article that I read that I kind of was like, wow, this is super important. And it was basically that you have to remember that when it comes to being hired by a company, no matter what the incentives are, what the hiring package is, what the bonus is, what you get when you're there is, at the end of the day, there's this branding going along when you get hired by a company like, hey, this is a family. We work best here. We are here for you and all this stuff. But overall, don't forget, in the real world, you don't pick your family. And if your family does you bad or harms you or whatever, you still can't unpick your family, okay? Family's forever. But overall, when it comes to building a business, what you do build is teams. And these teams are created for one very simple reason: to make the company money via providing value. So you provide value, thus the company makes more money. If you don't provide value, if you're not a part of the team how you should be a part of the team, they will not have you for that long. It's kind of like how the whole thing works. You can call it pretty, you can call it like nice or whatever, but at the end of the day, people are there to perform a task, which is basically make money for the company. So overall, you always have to remember this. When you're being hired by a company, you're being hired for a team. When you're being hired for the team, if you're one of the best people in this team, the likelihood of you being laid off is actually very slim. Now, let me tell you guys a very little story here. And it's that when I was in college, I remember one day I went into work. I was doing work study in the financial department, and I saw everyone moving boxes around left and right. And I was like, "Can I help you guys? Like, what's going on? Are we switching rooms or whatever?" It turns out half the department was basically being sliced in half, and people were being fired. And I was like, "Wow, that's kind of crazy." But the people that left, people that were there for 15 years, 10 years, people that had their identities wrapped up in the whole like life and family of the business, they eventually weren't really that essential to the teams. And you also remember, when you're in a job, are you essential to the team? If you feel like what you're doing is not really that valuable and anybody can do it, that's obviously a sign that that can be a problem and that can put you at jeopardy. So when that happened, I noticed the people that stayed behind were people that were essential to the team. And when those people left, they also got raises and bonuses. Now, what I mean is this, okay, guys? Tommy, are you saying that it's just good and normal to fire people? The answer is, of course, you don't want to fire people. You don't want to lay people off. But in the end, when you have a business and you're basically trying to meet a certain goal or whatever, the goal is, if you have a lot of work and jobs that aren't needed, that can cause a bad reaction, it can basically cost the whole business, thus nobody will have a job anyways. Now, even further along, guys, my point number 2 here is, I want to explain the economics of hiring with a very simple idea. You know, why did they go ahead and hire all these people in the first place? Now, 2 years later, they're basically firing everybody. The answer is very simple. They hired all these people temporarily, and I'm pretty well aware, in a way, objectively, but obviously not legitimately, because I can't really predict what they were thinking at the same time. And plus, I don't want to put myself in trouble. But overall, I can tell, right? Everybody can tell. Like, they knew there was going to be this massive surge of growth during the pandemic years because we printed a bunch of money into the economy, which is kind of cool, but also not that great. So they hired a bunch of people to meet that new demand, but now the demand is slowing down, and now they're like, we don't need all these people, and that can cause us a problem, and that's what they're basically firing people. If you think about it, it's like, I remember I used to work at the Gap for a while, and I would go in there from September to December, and they would hire me basically over the peak season. And once December was over, if you were essential, if you became a crazy part of that team, they would keep you. But if you were like me, they let you go. And they let me go. I was terrible at folding clothes, and I accepted it, okay? But overall, to put this even further and to make sense of it, let's say, for example, I have a business, and my business is selling basketballs, okay? That's what I do. I sell basketballs. And every single day, I do around 100 basketballs, all right? And things are going great. But all of a sudden, basically, Michael Jordan gives me a shout out. He's like, Tommy's balls are the best. And all of a sudden, my basketball business goes crazy. It goes from 100 basketballs a day to now I'm selling 1,000 basketballs per day. And I'm getting all these new orders all of a sudden. Well, guess what? I got to hire personnel to meet that new demand. I hire all these people that come in, they start making basketballs, we start selling and selling and selling and selling. Now, after 2 years, what happens is this: eventually the demand slows down. Eventually, we're no longer doing 1,000, we're doing more like 500, and then we're doing 300. And then I start to notice that, hey, we have all these extra employees here that are meant to be here to basically perform the task of making 1,000 basketballs a day, but they're no longer doing that, so their job now isn't really that essential. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that when we printed that much money into the economy and basically demand was going crazy, we needed the supply to help meet that demand. So they hired all these people. Amazon hired a bunch of people. Facebook hired a bunch of people. But these are the big names. But imagine all the small businesses that basically hired a bunch of people, also created all these new jobs, all these incentives, all this work from home stuff, all of this stuff, right? All that happened. Now, what happens is now today, well, since demand is starting to slow down, tell me, why is it starting to slow down? Well, again, it's very simple, right? We had the pandemic, we closed things down, then we printed money, and now we're basically trying to fight inflation by basically raising interest rates. Whenever you raise interest rates, make it more expensive for you to borrow money and also businesses to basically expand, well, obviously, the demand in the economy is going to slow down. People are going to buy less things. They're going to become more worried when it comes to money. And they're also going to have, it's kind of like, for example, a problem in the sense that if people aren't buying that much, if people are saving more money, they're not spending that much at all. Well, obviously, businesses are going to have a loss in sales. And if they have a loss in sales, they don't need to produce as many products anymore. Thus, employees, like a lot of them, don't really need to be there. That's the overall thing, okay? And by the way, I'm actually very surprised that Amazon now is cutting employees because it is December time and they will have like the whole Amazon Prime and all these crazy deals or whatever. And also Black Friday is coming along. So I'm not really sure why they're cutting so much people so early, but that just basically shows you if you hire a lot of people and eventually it's temporary, eventually you will have to let those people go. Now, overall, Tommy, what do you think I should do to make myself or prepare myself as far as, for example, a layoff? Now, overall, like I said before, the good thing about being a part of a team and a business is that if you are an essential part of that team cannot function without you, in a sense, right? Theoretically. So the idea is the more valuable you are to the team, the more work you do, the more ideas you bring to the table. Basically, the more essential you basically are, the harder it's going to be to let you go, even when the company cannot afford to have you. That's the idea, and that's pretty cool, okay? Because that basically means that, hey, the better you do your job, the more well-versed you are, the more valuable you become, the harder it's going to be to actually let you go. But even then, I always recommend that everybody out there have at least 6 months to 12 months worth of your emergency funds in there. So that way, if you do get laid off, yes, you're probably going to have a severance package potentially. You're also going to have, for example, unemployment. Also, those checks come in handy. But overall, if you also have an emergency fund, it gives you some extra room to say, hey, you know, I'm not going to go ahead and just take the first job that comes across my table. I'm going to wait a little longer. And I'm just going to basically find the job that I actually want. But overall, guys, to summarize everything in this video, the idea is that, yes, there might be a massive layoff. And yes, we might be in a recession. But overall, if you remember, like back in 1929, well, who remembers that? Like, nobody was alive back then, okay? Unless you're Warren Buffett or something like that. But overall, like back in 1929, before the Great Depression, which were actually like 4 mini depressions in reality, the whole thing is like while everyone was going through that process, nobody called it a depression really. So while we're going through this process today, nobody's probably going to call it a recession or a depression, but these are obvious signs of problems, okay? When you have layoffs, people are not going to be working anymore, and you have a lot of issues. But it's a lot better to have that than to have crazy inflation running rampant. So the best thing you can do, again, is make yourself more valuable as an employee to make sure that you're like basically solid. And by the way, I do have to say one thing here. People might say, Tommy, this is exactly why you want to run your own business. Yeah, a business gives you more flexibility, but there's also a lot more risk. And guess what? When you're talking about economical problems, and for example, quantifying, like what is that called? Quantifying easing, or what's that word? Quantitative easing. Oh, there you go. Quantitative easing. Whenever you're talking about those things right there, when you're talking about like, hey, the Fed is saying we're going to raise the interest rates to basically stop this and stop that and slow down the economy and slow down. You can't stop that. So even if you're a business, that's going to affect you in a sense because people are not going to be buying your products as much. So everyone is going to run some risk in a sense. So everyone should be prepared to go through a few hard months just in case. And if it doesn't happen, at least you're ready and prepared for it. But overall, guys, that is it. Very simple video, very basic stuff. But overall, this stuff can basically help you out a ton. As always, guys, comment down below job so I know you made it all the way to the end. Up here is another video. Over here is my Facebook, subscribe. And as always, long-term team officially out.